You've been eating avocados your whole life thinking you're doing something great for your body, and you probably are. But here's what nobody tells you. There are 10 specific mistakes that can turn this so-called superfood into something genuinely dangerous, especially once you cross the age of 60. And by the end of this video, you will never look at an avocado the same way again. Let's start with something that almost everyone gets wrong, and I mean everyone regardless of how health conscious they are. Most people believe that if something is natural and nutritious, more of it is always better. Avocados are healthy, so why not eat them every day? Why not eat 2 or 3? That logic sounds reasonable on the surface, but when you dig into the science, particularly the physiology of an aging body, that thinking starts to fall apart in some very important ways. Now, before we get into the mistakes, let me be clear about something. Avocados are genuinely one of the most nutrient-dense foods on the planet. They contain healthy monounsaturated fats, a stunning variety of vitamins and minerals, and a compound called oleocanthal that has real anti-inflammatory properties for most people. They are an excellent food, but the key phrase there is most people and eaten correctly, because context matters enormously in nutrition, and it matters even more as your body changes with age. Here is something your doctor probably hasn't told you. After the age of 60, your digestive system, your kidneys, your liver, and your cardiovascular system all begin to operate differently. Enzyme production slows down, kidney filtration rates decline, sometimes significantly, medication use increases, and your body's ability to regulate certain nutrients, process certain compounds, and manage inflammation shifts in ways that make you far more sensitive to dietary choices than you were at 30 or 40. What was perfectly safe at 40 can become genuinely problematic at 65, and that is exactly the lens through which we need to look at avocados. So let's talk about mistake number 1, and this one surprises almost everybody. Eating too much avocado when you're on blood pressure or heart medication. This is far more common than you think, and the consequences can be serious. Here's the science behind it. Avocados are extraordinarily rich in potassium. In fact, a single medium avocado contains somewhere between 700 and 975 millis of potassium. That's nearly double what you'd find in a banana, which is the fruit most people think of when they think about potassium. Now, potassium is essential. It helps regulate your heartbeat, supports nerve function, and keeps your blood pressure in balance. But, and this is a critical but, potassium must be kept within a very narrow range in your bloodstream. Too little is dangerous. Too much is equally dangerous. The medical term for high potassium levels is hyperkalemia, and it is a condition that becomes increasingly common as people age, particularly those with any degree of kidney disease, which, by the way, affects approximately 37 million adults in the United States alone. And the vast majority of them don't even know they have it. Your kidneys are responsible for filtering excess potassium out of your blood. When kidney function declines even modestly, even subclinically, potassium can start to accumulate. Add in a daily avocado habit, and you may be pushing your potassium levels higher than your body can safely manage. Now, here's where the medication piece comes in. A large category of blood pressure medications, specifically ACE inhibitors like lisinopril and ramipril, and ARBs like losartan and valsartan, already work in a way that raises potassium levels as a side effect. If you are on any of these medications and you are eating avocados daily, you could be compounding the problem significantly. Hypokalemia doesn't always feel like much at first, maybe some muscle weakness, some fatigue, a little heart fluttering, but in more severe cases it can cause dangerous heart rhythm abnormalities. This is not something to be cavalier about. If you are over 60 and on any heart or blood pressure medication, you need to talk to your doctor about your potassium intake before making avocados a daily staple. Mistake number 2 is one that trips up people who are trying to do everything right, and that's eating avocado at the wrong time of day and the wrong combination for their specific metabolic situation. Here's what I mean. Avocados are predominantly fat. Roughly 77% of their calories come from fat. Most of it in the form of oleic acid, a monounsaturated omega-9 fatty acid. Fat as a macronutrient dramatically slows the rate at which your stomach empties. This is called the gastric emptying rate, and it matters enormously for people managing blood sugar. For a diabetic or pre-diabetic individual, and after 60, that's a very large percentage of the population, eating avocado alongside high glycemic carbohydrates might seem like a smart move because the fat slows glucose absorption. And in theory, that sounds logical, but the research is more nuanced than that. What the science actually shows is that when dietary fat is chronically consumed alongside refined carbohydrates, it can contribute to something called insulin resistance, particularly in muscle cells. The fat essentially interferes with insulin's ability to shuttle glucose into muscle tissue, leaving more sugar in the bloodstream over time. This doesn't mean avocados cause diabetes. They don't. But it does mean that if you are already insulin resistant or diabetic, casually pairing avocado toast on white bread with a glass of orange juice every single morning may not be the blood sugar strategy you think it is.
The avocado part is fine.
The combination and the timing are where the problem lives. For people over 60 who are managing blood sugar, and studies suggest that nearly half of American adults are either diabetic or pre-diabetic, pairing avocado with non-starchy vegetables, quality protein, or low glycemic foods is a far smarter approach. Eating it in the morning on an empty stomach when cortisol is naturally elevated and insulin sensitivity is already slightly reduced is also something worth reconsidering. Mistake number 3 is about something most people would never suspect: the ripeness of the avocado itself. There is a widespread belief that avocado is avocado, that whether it's rock hard or perfectly soft, the nutritional content is basically the same. But this isn't entirely accurate, and for someone with digestive sensitivities, which become considerably more common after 60, it matters quite a bit. Unripe avocados contain significantly higher concentrations of certain compounds, including tannins and a substance called persin, which is primarily found in the skin, pit, and leaves of the avocado plant, but is present in small amounts in unripe fruit as well. Now, persin in large doses is actually toxic. It's the reason veterinarians warn strongly against feeding avocado to pets. In humans, the amounts in unripe fruit are generally too small to cause serious harm, but they can absolutely cause gastrointestinal distress, bloating, cramping, nausea, and sometimes diarrhea. And here's why this is especially relevant for people over 60. As you age, your gut lining becomes more permeable. Your gut microbiome diversity tends to decline, and your ability to produce sufficient digestive enzymes, including lipase, which breaks down fat, decreases. An aging digestive system is simply less resilient. What a 30-year-old gut handles without complaint, a 65-year-old gut may struggle with considerably. Beyond that, unripe avocados have a much higher content of certain polyols, a type of fermentable carbohydrate that falls into the category of what nutritionists call FODMAPs. For anyone with irritable bowel syndrome, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, or general digestive sensitivity, eating underripe avocado can trigger significant discomfort. The rule here is straightforward: wait for the avocado to ripen. A ripe avocado should yield to gentle pressure, have a dark skin if it's a Hass variety, and have a rich, creamy texture throughout. No brown streaks, no hard center. If it doesn't pass those tests, give it another day or two. Your digestive system will thank you. Mistake number 4, and this one has to do with how you store avocado once it's been cut, is something that creates a real food safety concern, particularly for older adults. The moment you cut an avocado open, a clock starts ticking. The flesh begins to oxidize. That's the browning you see. And more importantly, it becomes an ideal environment for bacterial growth, especially if it's been stored improperly. Many people cut an avocado, use half, and then wrap the other half in plastic wrap and leave it on the counter or in the refrigerator for several days. This seems harmless, but the research tells a different story. A study conducted by the FDA found that the skin of avocados, that dark, bumpy outer layer, harbors bacteria, including Listeria, monocytogenes, and Salmonella at rates that were higher than expected. And here's the critical part. When you cut through that skin with a knife, those bacteria on the exterior can be dragged directly into the flesh. If that cut avocado then sits in the refrigerator for 2 or 3 days, you now have a situation where bacteria that entered during cutting have had considerable time to proliferate in a nutrient-rich, moist environment. For a young, healthy person with a robust immune system, this might amount to nothing more than a mild stomach upset. But for someone over 60, particularly anyone on immunosuppressive medications, anyone with chronic illness, or anyone whose immune function has declined with age, Listeria is genuinely dangerous. It can cause severe illness, and in elderly individuals, it is one of the leading causes of foodborne illness-related hospitalizations. The safe practice is to store cut avocado with the pit left in the remaining half. Use lemon or lime juice on the cut surface to slow oxidation and consume it within 24 hours whenever possible. Do not let it sit for days and assume it is still safe simply because it was refrigerated. Mistake number 5, and this is perhaps the most counterintuitive of all, is about eating avocado while taking certain over-the-counter and prescription medications that most people consider completely routine. One of the most important and least discussed is warfarin, also known by the brand name Coumadin. Warfarin is a blood thinner used by millions of people over 60 to prevent strokes and blood clots, and it is one of the most finicky medications in all of pharmacology. Its effectiveness is exquisitely sensitive to dietary changes, particularly changes in vitamin K intake. Now here's the thing about avocados and vitamin K. A single avocado contains approximately 40 micrograms of vitamin K, a moderate but meaningful amount. Vitamin K plays a direct role in the blood clotting cascade, essentially doing the opposite of what warfarin is trying to accomplish. When your vitamin K intake fluctuates significantly from day to day, eating 3 avocados this week, none the next, your warfarin levels become unpredictable, and your INR, the measure of how well the blood is being thinned, swings in ways that are genuinely dangerous. Too much clotting and you risk a stroke, too little and you risk a bleeding event. The solution isn't to avoid avocados if you're on warfarin, it's to be consistent. Eat them regularly in consistent amounts and inform your physician and pharmacist about your dietary habits so your medication can be adjusted accordingly. But the mistake, the dangerous one, is eating them sporadically and in wildly varying amounts without realizing that you're affecting the very medication that is protecting you from a stroke. Now let's move into mistake number 6, and this one is specifically about something that happens in the mouth before the avocado even reaches your digestive system, and it connects to a risk that most people in their 60s and beyond are completely unaware of: avocado allergy. Now, before you skip past this thinking it doesn't apply to you, hear this out carefully, because avocado allergy in older adults presents very differently from how most people imagine a food allergy works. When most people think of a food allergy, they picture hives, swelling, difficulty breathing, the classic anaphylactic response. And yes, that kind of allergy to avocado does exist, but there is a second, far more common type of avocado-related reaction that is vastly underdiagnosed, particularly in people over 50 and 60. And it goes by the name oral allergy syndrome, sometimes called pollen food allergy syndrome. Here's how it works. Avocados contain proteins that are structurally similar to proteins found in certain pollens, particularly birch pollen and also latex. When your immune system has already been sensitized to these pollens, which happens naturally over decades of exposure and becomes increasingly common with age, it can mistakenly identify the proteins in avocado as the same threat. The result is a localized reaction in the mouth and throat, tingling, itching, mild swelling of the lips and tongue, a scratchy feeling in the throat that begins within minutes of eating raw avocado. In most cases, it resolves quickly and doesn't progress further, but in some individuals, particularly those with a strong latex allergy, a phenomenon doctors call latex fruit syndrome, the reaction can escalate. What makes this particularly relevant for older adults is that oral allergy syndrome tends to develop gradually over time. You may have eaten avocados without any issue for decades, and then somewhere in your 50s or 60s you begin noticing a subtle tingling after eating them. This is not imaginary. This is your immune system, which has been accumulating pollen sensitization for years, finally reaching a threshold where the cross-reactive proteins in avocado start triggering a response. Many people dismiss this as a texture sensitivity or chalk it up to heartburn. They don't recognize it as an immune reaction, and so they continue eating avocados, sometimes in larger amounts, not realizing that each exposure carries a small but real risk of the reaction becoming more severe over time. If you notice any unusual sensation in your mouth or throat after eating raw avocado, even something mild that you've been dismissing, mention it to your doctor. One important side note, cooking avocado generally denatures the proteins responsible for oral allergy syndrome, which means that cooked avocado, like in a warm avocado soup or a baked dish, often doesn't trigger the same reaction. But raw avocado, especially in guacamole or sliced on a salad, is where the risk lives. Mistake number 7 is about a topic that sits at the intersection of nutrition and pharmacology, and it is one that almost no one talks about in the context of avocados specifically. Avocados contain significant amounts of tyramine, a naturally occurring compound formed from the breakdown of the amino acid tyrosine as foods ripen and ferment. Tyramine has a very specific and important interaction with a class of antidepressants known as MAO inhibitors, or MAOIs. These include medications like phenelzine, tranylcypromine, and clozapine, which is also used in Parkinson's disease management. MAO inhibitors work by blocking the enzyme monoamine oxidase, which is responsible for breaking down neurotransmitters like serotonin, dopamine, and norepinephrine. But this same enzyme is also responsible for breaking down tyramine in the gut and liver. When that enzyme is blocked, tyramine from food is absorbed directly into the bloodstream in far greater quantities than normal. The result is something called a hypertensive crisis, a sudden, severe spike in blood pressure that can be genuinely life-threatening. Symptoms include a severe pounding headache, racing heart, chest pain, sweating, and in the worst cases, stroke or cardiac event. This interaction is well documented and extremely serious, and avocados, particularly very ripe or overripe avocados, which have the highest tyramine content, are specifically flagged in dietary guidance for MAOI users. Now, MAOs are not the most commonly prescribed antidepressants today, but they are still used, and they are used in a population, people with treatment-resistant depression and Parkinson's disease, that skews older. If you or anyone you know is on one of these medications, the dietary restrictions around tyramine are not optional suggestions. They are medical necessities, and avocados need to be on that list of foods to be very cautious with, especially as they ripen toward overripeness. But here's something broader and more universally applicable embedded in this mistake. Always check the dietary interactions of any medication you are taking against your regular food choices. Nutrition and pharmacology are not separate worlds. They interact constantly, and nowhere is this more true than in an aging body managing multiple medications simultaneously, a situation that describes the majority of adults over 60 in the developed world. Mistake number 8, and this is one that connects to a conversation happening right now at the cutting edge of cardiovascular research, is about something called plant sterols, and specifically how too much of them can paradoxically affect heart health under certain conditions. Avocados are one of the richest natural sources of plant sterols, particularly beta oil. Plant sterols are often celebrated, and rightly so, for their ability to reduce LDL cholesterol by competing with dietary cholesterol for absorption in the small intestine. This is a real and well-documented effect. Many cholesterol-lowering functional foods are specifically enriched with plant sterols for this reason. So what's the problem? The issue arises in a small but significant subset of the population who have a rare but underdiagnosed condition called cytosterolemia, also known as phytosterolemia. In people with this genetic disorder, plant sterols are absorbed into the bloodstream at far higher rates than normal, rather than being efficiently excluded as they are in most people. The accumulated plant sterols then deposit in blood vessel walls, tendons, and skin, dramatically accelerating atherosclerosis, the hardening and narrowing of arteries at a rate that can cause heart attacks in relatively young people, and compound cardiovascular risk significantly in older individuals. Cytosterolemia is often missed because it doesn't show up on a standard lipid panel. In fact, people with this condition frequently have normal or even seemingly healthy LDL cholesterol levels on standard testing, which gives them and their doctors a false sense of security. What gives it away is an elevated plant sterols level on specialized blood testing, an unusually high cardiovascular risk that doesn't quite match their standard cholesterol numbers. If you are over 60, have a family history of early heart disease, and eat large amounts of plant-based foods, including avocados, regularly, and yet your cardiovascular risk seems disproportionate to your other risk factors, this is something worth raising with your cardiologist. A specialized test called a plasma plant sterol level can identify it. Again, for the vast majority of people, the plant sterols in avocado are beneficial, but the mistake is assuming that because something is natural and generally healthy, it carries zero risk for every individual in every circumstance. Personalized nutrition matters, and it matters more as you age. Mistake number 9 is one that is entirely practical, entirely common, and entirely avoidable, but it has real consequences for older adults that go beyond simple digestive discomfort. This mistake is about portion size, specifically chronically eating too much avocado under the mistaken belief that because the avocado is healthy, calories from avocado simply don't count the same way as calories from other foods. This is one of the most persistent myths in the health and wellness space, and it is simply not supported by the physiology of energy metabolism. Let's be precise about this. A medium avocado, roughly 150 grams, contains approximately 240 calories. Most of those calories come from fat. And while it is absolutely true that monounsaturated fats like oleic acid are metabolically favorable compared to trans fats or even excess saturated fats, fat is still the most calorie-dense macronutrient in existence, providing 9 calories per gram compared to 4 calories per gram for protein and carbohydrate. Eating 2 full avocados a day, which many enthusiastic health food devotees do, adds close to 500 calories to your daily intake from that source alone before you've eaten anything else. Now, why does this matter specifically for people over 60? Because after 60, several things happen simultaneously that change the calorie equation significantly. Your resting metabolic rate declines, meaning you burn fewer calories at rest than you did in younger decades. Muscle mass tends to decrease, a process called sarcopenia, which further reduces your baseline caloric expenditure. Since muscle tissue is metabolically more active than fat tissue, physical activity often decreases as well for a variety of reasons, including joint pain, injury history, and lifestyle changes. The net result is that your daily caloric needs are measurably lower than they were at 40, but your dietary habits may not have adjusted to reflect that reality. Chronic mild caloric excess, not dramatic overeating, just a few hundred extra calories a day over months and years leads to gradual weight gain, increased visceral fat, worsening insulin resistance, elevated triglycerides, and increased cardiovascular risk. And the cruel irony is that someone eating enormous amounts of avocado, olive oil, and nuts in the name of health can still end up with exactly the metabolic problems they were trying to prevent, simply because they ignored the fundamental principle of energy balance. The solution is not to avoid avocado, it's to be mindful of portion size. A sensible serving is about 1/3 to 1/2 of a medium avocado per day, not 2 whole ones, not 1 whole one at every meal. And now, mistake number 10, and I've saved this one for last because in some ways it encompasses all of the others, and it speaks to something much deeper than just the avocado itself. Mistake number 10 is eating avocado or any so-called superfood as a substitute for medical care, a substitute for professional dietary guidance, and a substitute for understanding your own specific health context. This is the meta mistake, the foundational error that makes all the other 9 possible. Here is the reality of modern health content, and I say this with full awareness of the irony that you are watching health content right now. The internet, social media, YouTube, they are saturated with nutritional advice that presents single foods as miracle solutions. Avocados cure inflammation. Avocados reverse aging. Avocados protect your heart. And while there is legitimate science supporting many of these claims in certain contexts, the extrapolation from this food has beneficial properties to eat as much of this food as possible, and it will solve problems is a logical leap that the science does not support. The human body, and especially the aging human body, is not a simple machine where you input the right superfood and output perfect health. It is an extraordinarily complex biological system shaped by genetics, by decades of dietary history, by the specific medications you take, by the unique pattern of chronic conditions you may be managing, by your gut microbiome composition, by your hormonal status, by your kidney and liver function, and by 100 other variables that no YouTube video and no wellness influencer can account for on your behalf. The avocado mistakes we've walked through today are real. The potassium interaction with blood pressure medications is real. The tyramine interaction with MAO is real. The food safety concern with improperly stored cut avocado is real. The risk for people with cytomegalovirus real. These are not hypothetical concerns invented to generate views. They are documented science-backed risks that disproportionately affect older adults. And they are risks that exist precisely because avocado is a potent biologically active food, not just an innocent garnish. But here's what I want you to take away from all of this. And please listen carefully because this is the most important thing I will say in this entire video. The goal is not fear. The goal is never fear. Fear of food is itself a health problem. It leads to anxiety, nutritional restriction, orthorexia, and a complicated relationship with eating that does enormous damage to quality of life, particularly in older adults who already faces enough challenges navigating the landscape of aging. The goal here is informed confidence, the ability to make deliberate, conscious choices about what you eat, why you eat it, how much of it you eat, and how it interacts with the specific unique biology that is yours and yours alone. So let's bring all of this together in a way that is actually useful, not just intellectually interesting, but practically applicable to your daily life. If you are over 60 and you enjoy avocados, and you should enjoy them because they genuinely are one of the most nutritionally complete whole foods available to us, here is the framework that the science supports. First, know your kidney function. Ask your doctor for a basic metabolic panel that includes your GFR, your glomerular filtration rate, which is the standard measure of how well your kidneys are filtering your blood. If your GFR is normal, moderate daily avocado consumption is unlikely to cause potassium-related problems for you. If your GFR is reduced, and again, millions of people have reduced kidney function without knowing it, then potassium management becomes a real consideration, and your avocado intake should be discussed with your physician specifically. Second, know your medications. Not just what they are called, but what they do metabolically. If you are on an ACE inhibitor, an ARB, a potassium-sparing diuretic, warfarin, or any MAOI, these are the specific drug classes where avocado's nutritional profile creates clinically meaningful interactions. Your pharmacist is an underutilized resource in this regard. Pharmacists are trained specifically in drug-nutrient interactions and are often more accessible than physicians for this kind of question. Use them. Third, pay attention to how your body responds. This sounds almost insultingly simple, but in practice, it is something that many people have been trained out of doing. We live in a culture that outsources bodily awareness to diagnostic tests and imaging and blood work, which are all valuable, but the body itself communicates constantly, and learning to listen to it is a genuine skill. If you notice that your heart feels irregular after eating large amounts of avocado, that is worth paying attention to. If you notice mouth-tingling digestive distress, unusual fatigue, these are signals, not coincidences. Keep a simple food and symptom journal for a few weeks. The patterns that emerge can be remarkably informative, and they give your doctor something concrete to work with rather than a vague complaint. Fourth, and this connects to mistake number 9 about portion size. Reframe your relationship with healthy fats in the context of your current metabolic reality, not the metabolic reality of your younger self.